She woke up before the sun, the small room around her dim and quiet. The sounds of the city outside were just beginning, soft murmurs of life stretching across the streets. Her life had always been a struggle, a series of small battles she faced quietly every day. Her family relied on her more than anyone else realized, though they never said it aloud. She had grown used to the heavy weight of responsibility, learning to carry it without complaint. Her morning began the same way it always did, with careful movements so as not to wake her younger siblings. She quietly made breakfast from what little they had, her hands skilled in the art of making simple ingredients stretch into enough for everyone. There was a rhythm to her life, almost mechanical, but not without a kind of warmth. She had learned to find comfort in these small routines, a sense of pride in her ability to provide in a world that often seemed unfair. After breakfast, she went out into the streets, carrying a small basket. She sold flowers and simple crafts to anyone who would stop. Her voice, soft but confident, invited people to look, to buy, to smile. She had learned that kindness often earned more than just money. A smile, a kind word, even a simple laugh could sometimes feel like more than any coin she earned in her long days. As she walked through the bustling streets, she noticed people she knew, neighbors and strangers alike, moving quickly through their own lives. She greeted them all politely, a small gesture that cost her nothing but gave her a sense of connection. Life was hard, but she had learned to see small moments of beauty and humanity in the ordinary. She had learned to survive, and more than that, she had learned to endure with grace. On this particular morning, she saw him for the first time. A beggar sitting quietly on the edge of the busy street, his clothes worn and dirty, his eyes tired but not empty. There was something different about him, something that caught her attention and held it. He did not shout for attention, did not beg loudly or angrily. He simply sat there, observing the world with a calmness that seemed out of place among the chaos of the streets. She paused for a moment, her basket heavy in her hands. Something about him made her heart quicken, though she could not understand why. She had passed countless beggars before, but this one seemed different. There was a dignity in his posture, a quiet intelligence in the way he watched the people move past him. He seemed almost out of place, but not in a way that made her feel pity, more like curiosity, a strange sense of wonder she had not felt in a long time. Despite herself, she approached him. She had a small piece of bread, not much, but enough to offer. She placed it gently beside him, careful not to startle him. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked up at her, his eyes meeting hers, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. There was a depth in his gaze, a quiet intensity that made her pause. He nodded slightly, a small gesture of acknowledgement, and then returned his gaze to the street. "Thank you," he said, his voice low but clear, carrying a calmness that was unusual. She walked on, her mind restless. She couldn't stop thinking about him. There was something about the way he had accepted her small offering, the way he had looked at her, that felt different. Most people she helped were grateful, yes, but their gratitude was expected, almost transactional. This man, he was different. The days passed, and she found herself returning to the same street, hoping to see him again. She told herself it was curiosity, nothing more, but she could not deny the growing interest she felt. Every day she offered a small piece of food, a smile, a few words. And every day he responded with quiet kindness, never asking for more, never complaining, never making her feel pity or shame. As she continued her work, selling her flowers and small crafts, she found herself thinking of him often. How did he come to be here? Why did he sit so quietly among the chaos? She tried to find explanations that made sense, but none satisfied her curiosity. And yet she felt no fear. There was a strange comfort in his presence, as if he understood something about her that no one else did. Her friends noticed a change in her as well. She smiled more often, even when tired. She walked with a lighter step, her eyes brighter despite the exhaustion of her long days. They teased her gently, asking if she had someone in mind, but she would only shake her head and laugh, hiding the truth from everyone. She didn't know what it was exactly, only that this beggar had touched something in her heart she had thought long buried. One afternoon, she found herself sitting near him on the curb, her basket of unsold flowers beside her. He looked at her curiously, as if sensing the thoughts running through her mind. She offered him one of the flowers, its petals soft and fragrant. He accepted it with a quiet nod, and for a moment they sat in silence, sharing the world without words. The traffic roared past. People rushed by, but in that small space there was calm. She began to talk to him more, asking simple questions about his day, his thoughts, his life. He answered with a gentle wisdom, never revealing too much but always offering insight that made her think. He spoke of people and kindness, of struggles and endurance, of seeing beauty in the simplest of moments. She found herself listening intently, captivated by his perspective, feeling that she was learning something she had never known before. It was during these moments that she realized she felt something new, something she could not name. A connection that went beyond the ordinary, beyond friendship or simple kindness. And though she told herself it was foolish, she could not deny the warmth in her heart when he spoke to her, the quiet excitement she felt when she saw him waiting in the street. The city continued around them, indifferent to their small world of shared moments. She had never imagined that a beggar could hold such presence, such an effect on her thoughts and emotions, and yet she could not deny it. Something about him made her feel alive in a way the harshness of life had rarely allowed. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the streets filled with shadows, she walked home slowly, thinking of him. She wondered what tomorrow would bring, if she would see him again, and what it meant that a simple act of kindness had grown into something more profound. She carried the image of his calm eyes, the quiet dignity with which he met the world, and she felt a strange hope bloom inside her. Her life was still difficult, still full of responsibilities and struggles, but now it held a new element, something she could not ignore, a presence that made the ordinary extraordinary, that made the small victories of her day feel even more meaningful. She did not know where this path would lead, only that it had begun quietly in the simplest of ways, with a piece of bread and a shared smile on a crowded street. She found herself thinking about him constantly, the quiet beggar who had somehow unsettled her heart. Each morning she hurried through her chores and small jobs just to reach the street where he often sat. The world seemed heavier yet somehow brighter with the thought of him waiting there, always calm, always observing. Their conversations had grown slowly. At first it was just a few words, polite greetings, small exchanges about the weather or the day, but soon they began to share more. She spoke of her struggles, the exhaustion that came with her life, the dreams she dared not speak aloud to anyone else. He listened quietly, sometimes nodding, sometimes tilting his head as if weighing her words. There was no judgment in him, no pity, only an understanding that made her feel safe. One afternoon, as the sun beat down harshly, she brought him a small glass of water. He accepted it with a gentle smile, a quiet thank you that seemed to fill the space around them with a calm energy. She sat nearby, her knees pulled to her chest, and they watched the world together. People passed by in a hurry, the city noisy and impatient, but in that small space it felt like they were in a world of their own. "Do you ever get tired of sitting here all day?" she asked softly, curiosity pushing her to ask something more personal. He smiled faintly, a curve that hinted at many unspoken stories. "Sometimes," he said, "but sitting is not always a burden. Watching people, listening, learning, that can be more valuable than moving fast through life." She frowned slightly, unsure what he meant, but the words lingered in her mind long after she walked away. There was a wisdom in him that felt unusual, a depth that went beyond the streets they shared. He spoke like someone who had seen much, felt much, yet carried it lightly without bitterness. Days turned into weeks. She continued her work, selling flowers, running errands, and helping her family. But now she carried with her the anticipation of seeing him again. Every time she approached, her heart beat a little faster, a quiet excitement that she tried to ignore but could not. When she offered him a small gift, a piece of bread, a flower, a bit of fresh fruit, he accepted it with the same calm gratitude. One evening, as twilight spread over the city, she found herself sitting near him again. He was cleaning the small patch of ground around him, making it tidy in a way that was meticulous yet quiet. She watched fascinated. There was a grace in his movements, a care that seemed out of place in someone who had so little. "Why do you keep things so neat?" she asked curiously, unable to stop herself. He paused, looking at her with a faint smile. "Even in little things, order brings comfort. Chaos can overwhelm, but small actions can create peace even here." Her heart seemed to catch at his words. There was something in the way he spoke, something that made her want to listen more, to understand more. She realized that she had started to look forward to these moments, not for what she gave, but for the way he made her feel, seen, understood, and strangely important. She began sharing more of her own life with him, opening her heart in ways she had never done before. She told him about her family, her fears, and the small dreams she held close. He listened, offering advice that was gentle and thoughtful, never imposing, always leaving her to make her own choices. There was no pressure, no expectation, only a steady presence that made her feel safe. As the days passed, she noticed small acts of kindness from him that she could not explain. Sometimes he would leave a small gift, a coin, a flower, a note with a simple message. She knew he had so little himself, yet he found ways to give. It made her think deeply about what truly mattered in life. The people around her noticed the change in her. She smiled more often, laughed more freely, and moved with a lightness she had not known before. Friends asked about it, teasingly suggesting she had fallen for someone. She would blush and shake her head, unwilling or perhaps unsure how to explain. How could she tell them about a beggar who had become the center of her thoughts? How could she explain the pull she felt, the curiosity, the warmth, the growing admiration? One rainy afternoon, she found herself huddled under a small awning, watching as he quietly endured the storm. He did not complain, did not move to seek shelter more comfortable than what was near. He simply endured, as if he had learned to live through difficulties with quiet dignity. She could not leave him alone in the rain and approached carefully, offering her umbrella. He accepted it without words, allowing her to walk beside him, sharing its small protection. Walking with him that day, listening to the soft rhythm of raindrops around them, she felt a strange sense of intimacy. They were no longer just passerby and beggar. They were companions in the quiet understanding of life's hardships. She began to wonder about his life, his past, his thoughts that he shared so little about. There was a mystery to him that made her heart race with curiosity. As they reached the edge of the street, she hesitated, reluctant to leave him yet again. He turned to her with a faint, knowing smile. "You have kindness in you," he said simply. "Not many see the world the way you do. Do not let it fade." The words lingered in her mind long after she returned home. She could not stop thinking about him, about the quiet strength he carried, about the way he made her feel, seen, valued, understood. Her life continued with its hardships, but now there was a spark of something more, something unexpected, that made each day brighter despite the struggle. Weeks turned into months and their bond grew quietly, naturally. She looked forward to their meetings, not out of obligation, but because he had become a part of her life in a way that no one else had. She began to notice details, the way he smiled at small acts of beauty, the gentleness in his voice, the patience in his gaze. She admired him deeply, though she told herself it was only admiration, nothing more. Yet her heart betrayed her, whispering truths she dared not speak. She felt a growing affection, a connection that seemed to defy logic. How could a beggar, someone with so little, hold such power over her thoughts and emotions? How could he make her feel so alive in the midst of her ordinary life? He too seemed to notice a shift. The calm warmth in his eyes when he looked at her grew more pronounced, a quiet acknowledgement of something unspoken. He did not rush her, did not force words or feelings, but allowed their bond to deepen naturally. There was a trust forming between them, a silent understanding that grew stronger with each meeting, each shared moment. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink over the city, they sat together on the curb, watching the world move around them. She offered him a small flower she had saved from her day's work. He accepted it with a faint smile, placing it gently beside him. "Why do you spend so much time with me?" she asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. He looked at her thoughtfully. "Because you see me as I am, not as the world expects me to be. Many pass by, many look and see only a beggar. You see a person. That is rare. That is why I am here with you." Her heart ached at his words, a mixture of joy and confusion. She had not realized that what she felt was being returned in its own quiet, steady way. She felt a connection that went beyond words, beyond explanation. It was a feeling of understanding, of recognition, of a bond that neither wealth nor poverty could define. As she walked home that evening, the city lights beginning to twinkle around her, she felt a sense of anticipation she had not known in her life. There was a new chapter opening, one filled with mystery, kindness, and an unexpected connection that promised to change her life in ways she could not yet imagine. She did not know what the future held, only that the beggar she had met on the street had become someone she could not forget, someone who had quietly, profoundly touched her heart in days past. But the girl's life grew more complicated. She continued her work, her routines, her responsibilities, yet the quiet moments she shared with the beggar lingered in her mind, giving her strength yet also sparking doubts and fear. It was becoming harder to reconcile the life she knew with the feelings she felt. Her friends began to notice her distraction. They teased her at first, asking if she was dreaming of someone special, if someone had captured her heart. She smiled politely, dismissing their comments, but deep down she knew she could not tell them the truth. How could she explain that the person who mattered most to her in this world was a beggar, someone the world would never understand? How could she explain that his presence brought comfort and curiosity, a strange hope that grew quietly inside her? Her family, too, began to notice small changes. She laughed more easily, though she was tired, and she carried herself with a lightness that made them ask questions. She said little, fearing their judgment. They did not understand, and she was not ready to explain. The world she navigated every day was harsh, and she feared what they might say if they knew how deeply she cared for someone society looked down upon. Meanwhile, the beggar remained the same quiet presence. He did not press her, did not demand attention, yet there was a growing depth in their connection. Sometimes she would arrive and he would not be there, leaving her anxious and uneasy. Where did he go? What did he do? She asked herself these questions, though she received no answers. His absences only increased her longing, her curiosity, and her growing attachment. One evening, after a long day of work, she arrived to find him sitting quietly, his head bowed, almost motionless. She approached cautiously, sensing that something had shifted. "Are you all right?" she asked, worry lacing her voice. He looked up at her, his eyes calm but distant. "I am fine," he said softly, though she could sense a quiet heaviness in his tone. He did not explain further, leaving her to wonder what burden he carried that he had yet to share. It was a mystery that stirred something in her heart, a desire to understand him fully, yet she knew that such understanding would not come easily. In the following days, whispers began to reach her ears. People in her neighborhood, observing her growing attachment to the beggar, started to gossip. Friends warned her, neighbors whispered, family members questioned her. "Why do you spend so much time with him?" they asked, their voices filled with concern and disbelief. "He is a beggar. He cannot offer you anything. Why waste your time?" Their words weighed on her. She understood their concern, yet she could not deny the truth of her feelings. She knew he was more than appearances, more than the world could see. But how could she convince anyone of that? How could she justify the warmth and understanding he gave her in a world where wealth and status dictated value? She felt torn between the judgment of others and the quiet, undeniable bond that had formed between them. The beggar, sensing her unease, spoke one evening as the sun dipped low over the city. "Do not let their words affect you," he said calmly. "They do not see the heart. They see only the surface, and sometimes the surface deceives more than it reveals." She listened, taking comfort in his words, yet the conflict inside her remained. Society's expectations were strong, and the fear of judgment gnawed at her. What if she could not balance her feelings with the reality of the world she lived in? What if her heart led her to a path she could not follow safely? Her days became a dance of emotion, alternating between joy and fear. She cherished their moments together, yet each meeting was shadowed by the weight of what the world might think. She began to notice the strength of her own heart, how deeply she had come to care for someone society had labeled as lesser, someone the world might dismiss. And in that realization, a quiet courage began to grow. The beggar, too, seemed to sense the tension. He did not lecture or chastise. He simply existed in the quiet, offering a presence that calmed her storm of emotions. Sometimes he would leave small notes or gifts, reminders that the bond they shared was real, even if the world did not approve. He did not explain his life, his reasons, or his past. He only offered consistency, understanding, and subtle encouragement. One day, after a particularly exhausting morning, she found herself sitting near him in the park, the world moving around them in hurried chaos. She looked at him and whispered, almost to herself, "Why are you always so calm? How do you endure all this?" He met her gaze, and for the first time there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes. "Life is full of burdens," he said softly. But the weight we carry does not always define us. It is how we carry it, how we choose to respond that matters. She pondered his words, feeling a mixture of admiration and longing. His perspective was unlike anything she had encountered. In him, she saw resilience and wisdom, yet also a vulnerability that he did not easily reveal. She wanted to know more, to understand fully, but she knew that he would only share what he wished, and that was part of the mystery that drew her in. As the days turned into weeks, she found herself grappling with inner conflict more than ever. She felt deeply for him, yet the fear of what others would say, the fear of social ridicule, weighed heavily on her. How could she reconcile the purity of her feelings with the harsh reality of the world? She wrestled with guilt and shame, yet also with hope and affection. The beggar, sensing her turmoil, remained patient. He never demanded her attention or affection, only offered a quiet presence that spoke volumes. Sometimes he would share a story, a simple lesson, a gentle observation that made her reflect on life, on herself, and on the connection they shared. He did not ask for anything in return, only offered guidance and subtle reassurance. Her heart grew stronger even as doubts clouded her mind. She began to understand that true connection was rare and precious, and that it often came without explanation or social approval. The world might judge, might mock, might fail to understand, but the bond she shared with him was real, undeniable, and profound. Yet, challenges persisted. Neighbors began to watch them more closely, whispering comments and judgment. She overheard friends expressing disbelief, even warning her to stay away. Family members questioned her choices, unable to understand why she spent time with someone so far removed from their reality. Each confrontation left her shaken, yet also more determined. She realized that the feelings she held were hers alone, and that their validity did not depend on approval from anyone else. One evening, as the city lights flickered on and the streets grew quieter, she found herself walking with him through the empty avenues. Rain had fallen earlier, leaving the roads slick and shining. They walked side by side, sharing the silence that was both comforting and full of unspoken words. "Do you ever feel lonely?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, afraid to break the fragile peace. He paused, considering her question. "Loneliness is part of life," he said slowly. "But connection, even in its simplest form, can give life meaning. We are not alone when we see, understand, and care for each other." Her heart lifted at his words, feeling the truth in them resonate within her. She realized that despite the world's judgment, despite the challenges, despite the doubts that gnawed at her, she was not alone. They shared something rare, something precious, and that realization brought a quiet strength she had never known before. As she returned home that night, her thoughts were a mixture of fear, longing, and hope. She knew that the path ahead would not be easy. Society's judgment would continue, challenges would arise, and doubt would linger. Yet she also knew that the bond she shared with the beggar was real, a quiet force that had already begun to shape her life in profound ways. She went to bed that night with her mind full of questions and her heart full of emotion. Who was he truly? Why had he chosen this life? And most importantly, what did the future hold for them, bound together by a connection that defied explanation and societal expectation? She did not have the answers, only the certainty that her feelings were genuine, and that the moments they shared had become a lifeline, a source of hope, and a quiet rebellion against the limitations the world sought to impose on her heart. No one else ever had. She arrived at the street that morning with a mixture of hope and hesitation. The beggar was there as usual, sitting quietly on the curb, watching the world with calm eyes. But today something felt different. There was a stillness in his posture that she could not ignore, a sense that something was about to change. As she approached, he looked up and smiled, though there was a softness in it, almost a vulnerability she had never seen before. He gestured for her to sit beside him. She did, her heart beating faster, sensing that the moment they were about to share would be unlike any other. "There is something I need to tell you," he said quietly, his voice steady but gentle. She felt a shiver run down her spine. The words hung in the air, heavy with anticipation. She waited, unsure what revelation would come, but she trusted him entirely, as she always had. He took a deep breath and began. "I am not who you think I am. I am not simply a man living on the streets. My life, my circumstances are different from what you have seen. I have wealth, influence, a life that people would envy. But I chose this path for a time, to see the world as it is, to understand kindness without expectation, to find someone who values people for who they are, not what they have. She stared at him, disbelief mixing with confusion. Her mind raced to understand, to reconcile the image of the man she had come to know with this new truth. "You mean, all this time, you were not—" she stammered. He nodded gently. "Yes, I am wealthy, but I wanted to experience life as it is, without the trappings of money or status. I wanted to see who would treat me as a person, not as a figure of wealth. And you? Your kindness, your heart have shown me something I did not expect." Her emotions surged. Relief, shock, fear, joy, all collided within her. She felt the ground shift beneath her feet, unsure whether to be angry, to laugh, to cry. She had grown attached to the man she knew, the quiet beggar, the one who had listened, advised, and comforted her. And now to learn this truth felt like both a betrayal and a gift. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why hide who you really are?" He looked at her with eyes full of understanding. "Because I wanted to know you truly for who you are, not for what I could give you. I wanted to find someone whose heart was genuine, whose kindness was untainted by wealth or influence. You have shown me that. That is why I did not reveal my identity before." Her heart softened at his words. She realized that despite the shock, his intentions had been sincere. He had trusted her with the most important truth of his life, and that trust was not something she could take lightly. The realization brought tears to her eyes, not of sadness but of gratitude and overwhelming emotion. They sat together in silence for a while, letting the revelation sink in. She thought of all the times he had shared wisdom with her, all the small acts of kindness, the patience, the understanding. It all made sense now, yet it did not diminish the sincerity she had felt. If anything, it made her admire him more for the courage it took to live a life unseen, to seek genuine connection. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her hands trembling slightly. I care about you not for what you have, but for who you are. And I hope that what we shared, that it was real." He reached out, taking her hand in his, a quiet reassurance that no words could fully capture. "It was real," he said softly. "Every moment, every conversation, every laugh, every silence, we shared them genuinely. My life has given me many things, but meeting you has given me something far greater." The streets around them seemed to fade, the noise and rush of the city replaced by a quiet intimacy. For the first time, she saw him not as a beggar or a magnate, but as the man who had touched her heart so deeply. She realized that identity, wealth, or appearance mattered little in the face of genuine human connection. They spent the day walking through the city, exploring spaces she had never seen, guided not by money or opulence, but by a desire to share life as it was, simple and unpretentious. He showed her the small joys he had discovered in living as a beggar, the beauty in ordinary acts, the resilience of people, the kindness that often went unnoticed. She listened, captivated, feeling that she was seeing a new world through his eyes. As evening fell, they returned to the curb where they had first met. The city lights began to flicker on, casting a soft glow on the streets. She looked at him, feeling a mixture of awe and tenderness. "I still can't believe it," she said quietly. "All this time, and yet—" "You were right here all along." He smiled, a gentle, warm smile that seemed to carry the weight of the day. "Yes, I was here. And now that you know, I hope we can continue not as beggar and stranger, but as equals, as friends, perhaps more." Her heart swelled at his words. She had feared that the revelation might shatter the connection they shared, but instead, it strengthened it. She realized that her feelings were genuine, rooted not in wealth or status, but in the depth of understanding, patience, and care he had shown her. And in that realization, a quiet hope blossomed, a promise of what could be. The following days were different. She saw him not only as the beggar she had come to know, but also as the man of wealth he truly was. Yet he did not let his status interfere with the simplicity and honesty that had drawn her to him. He continued to walk beside her in the streets, to share conversations, to offer guidance and care without any pretense. It was a balance he maintained with skill, humility, and grace. People around her noticed the change as well. Friends and neighbors who had whispered and judged now saw a new confidence in her, a calmness that spoke of resilience and understanding. She realized that the world's judgment mattered less than the truth she held in her heart. She had found someone who valued her for who she was, And that was more important than any opinion or societal expectation. One afternoon, they visited a small park, a place she had loved since childhood. They walked among the trees, the sunlight filtering through the leaves, creating patterns on the ground. He told her stories of his life, not in boasts or tales of wealth, but in reflections on experiences, lessons learned, and the value of kindness. She listened, captivated, feeling that each story deepened her understanding of him and of life itself. "You have taught me more than I could have imagined," she said softly, her eyes reflecting the dappled sunlight. "Not just about life, but about myself, about patience, courage, and the heart." He looked at her with gentle admiration. "And you have reminded me what it means to see the world through someone's eyes, to value character over wealth, to appreciate the simple, quiet moments that truly matter." As the day ended, they sat together on a bench watching the sun dip below the horizon. The city lights began to twinkle, reflecting in her eyes as she turned to him. "I don't know what the future holds," she said quietly, "but I do know that what we shared was real, and that is more than I could have hoped for." He took her hand, holding it gently, his gaze steady and full of sincerity. "We will face the future together, whatever it may bring. What matters is the bond we have, the understanding and the love that grew quietly between us. That is real, and it will guide us forward." In that moment, she realized that the journey they had shared, from strangers to confidants, from curiosity to connection, had brought them to a place of trust, respect, and understanding. The revelation of his true identity had not broken their bond. It had strengthened it, revealing the depth of feelings they could not deny. As they walked home together, the city bustling around them, she felt a quiet sense of joy and anticipation. The mystery that had once intrigued her was now replaced by clarity and hope. She knew that life would continue to challenge them, but she also knew that their connection was strong enough to endure any obstacle. That night, she lay in bed reflecting on the day's revelation, her heart full of emotion. She thought of the man who had walked beside her through hardship and joy, the one who had shown her kindness, patience, and understanding. She realized that identity, status, and appearance mattered little when weighed against genuine human connection. What they had was rare, precious, and real, and that truth gave her a sense of peace and courage she had never known before. The days after the revelation were filled with a new rhythm, a mixture of excitement, adjustment, and quiet reflection. She woke each morning with a sense of hope that had been absent from her life before. Knowing who he truly was changed nothing of her affection. If anything, it deepened her understanding of the man she had come to care for so deeply. She realized that love, real love, was not about status or wealth. It was about connection, trust, and shared experiences. They continued to meet daily, walking through the streets of the city, exploring new corners, sharing thoughts, and discovering small joys together. The simplicity of their shared moments became precious. They laughed at little jokes, pointed out beauty in the ordinary, and spoke of dreams both big and small. It was a partnership of minds and hearts, a bond strengthened by honesty and the trials they had faced together. Adjusting to the knowledge of his true life required careful thought on her part. She had grown accustomed to the man she had known, the beggar who was gentle, patient, and attentive. Now seeing him navigate his life of wealth and influence while remaining the same humble, wise, and kind man was remarkable. It reassured her that despite the differences in their worlds, the essence of who he was remained unchanged. He too worked to ensure that their connection stayed grounded. He did not flaunt his wealth or status. Instead, he chose to live simply around her to preserve the authenticity of their bond. He valued her perspective, her honesty, and her insight. Every day he reminded her, through words and actions, that she was important to him, not for what she could offer, but for the depth of her heart. Her family noticed the changes too. They were initially hesitant, unsure how to react to the revelation, but as they observed him, they saw a man who treated her with respect, care, and attentiveness. His patience with her family, his quiet generosity, and his understanding demeanor slowly earned their trust. They realized that despite his wealth, he valued her opinions and feelings above all else, and in that they found comfort and acceptance. Friends, too, began to see the truth. The whispers and judgments that once shadowed her life faded as they recognized the sincerity of their connection. They saw how he brought out her strength, her joy, and her confidence. The love they shared was no longer hidden or a source of confusion, It became a testament to the power of genuine human connection, transcending appearances and social expectations. They faced challenges together as all couples do. Adjusting to his dual life, the public figure and the humble man she had known, required patience, understanding, and compromise. Yet each challenge brought them closer, reinforcing the foundation of trust and respect they had built. She learned to navigate spaces she had never entered, while he learned to see the world from her perspective, to appreciate the ordinary and the overlooked. One afternoon, they sat in a quiet park, sunlight streaming through the trees, leaves rustling gently in the breeze. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the light, and said softly, "I never imagined life could feel this full. I never imagined someone like you would choose to see me for who I am." He smiled, a calm and tender expression that seemed to hold the weight of every moment they had shared. "And I never imagined I would find someone whose heart matched the vision I held for the world. You have reminded me of what truly matters: honesty, kindness, courage, and love." They walked together hand in hand through the city streets. Passers-by might have seen them as ordinary, perhaps mismatched, but in reality they shared a connection that transcended appearances. Every glance, every smile, every touch reinforced the bond that had begun with a simple act of kindness and had grown into something profound. She continued her daily routines, but now with a lightness in her step, a confidence in her heart. Life's hardships remained, yet they were tempered by the knowledge that she was not facing them alone. She had someone who understood, someone who supported her, someone whose heart had been earned by her kindness rather than her station. Their evenings were often spent in quiet companionship. They would sit together, talking about dreams, fears, and the world around them. Sometimes they would remain silent, simply enjoying each other's presence, knowing that words were unnecessary to convey the depth of their connection. These moments of quiet intimacy became sacred, a space where they could be entirely themselves, free from judgment and expectation. He shared his insights and experiences, not to impress but to teach, to guide, and to enrich her understanding of life. She in turn shared her dreams, her fears, and her aspirations. In their conversations they found balance, growth, and inspiration. Each day brought new lessons, new joys, and a deeper appreciation for the extraordinary bond they had nurtured. They celebrated small victories together, her achievements in work or study, his personal milestones, moments of simple happiness. Each celebration was shared fully, not for grandeur or recognition, but for the pure joy of being together. In these celebrations they found a rhythm that harmonized their lives, blending the extraordinary with the ordinary seamlessly. Despite the challenges that wealth and societal expectations could bring, they remained grounded. He did not let his status create distance, and she did not let it create intimidation. They met as equals in spirit, in heart, and in understanding. This mutual respect became the cornerstone of their relationship, ensuring that the bond they shared was authentic, enduring, and free from pretense. One day, as they walked along a quiet riverside, she paused, looking at the water flowing steadily. "Do you ever worry that the world will change things between us?" she asked, uncertainty in her voice. He shook his head gently. "No. The world may judge, challenge, or misunderstand us, but what we have is ours. It is built on trust, understanding, and care. That cannot be taken away. We shape our own path together." Her heart lifted at his words. She realized that the future, no matter how uncertain, held promise. The bond they shared had been tested, strengthened, and validated by experience, and it would continue to guide them through whatever lay ahead.